So I have a question for you. How many of you were forced to come here tonight? Somehow, somebody forced you.
My heart forced me to come.
I was forced because I heard Norbert was in town, and I'm sure this is the last time I'll ever see him.
So how many of you really exercised your own will to come tonight? So based on that, you can all say you have what? Free will. Exactly. If you are able to exercise your will and do anything, raise your hand, don't raise your hand, talk, don't talk, then you have free will, because that is what it is. Now, looking at this whole notion is interesting. When you go and do research in any sort about consciousness or free will, you see that science still is struggling to fit it in the frame of science, which is something material that you would measure and you would replicate and all those things, and somehow. So forgive me for the interruption of technical problem. I have students, Baha'i students in Iran who cannot go to university, as many of you know that. And I teach them psychology online, and because they would like to know the integration of psychology and spirituality from a Baha'i perspective, then I record my talks, and it goes and gets uploaded on the BIHE site. And so these students who have to study away from university sites in Iran, they have to go into kitchens and basements. They're able to use the material that normally is not available to them. So I appreciate your patience and the fact that I can say hello to them. So this whole notion of free will is a matter of debate, because it doesn't fit within the frame of scientific definition and research. It is not a material thing. They cannot find a location in the brain that says this is the location of consciousness or free will. But yet, all of us saying that we do what we will to do, we choose to do certain things, we choose not to do certain things. You all can be sitting here and choosing to listen. You also can be here and choose not to listen. As very interestingly, Abdul Baha mentioned that, said that in his Paris talks, 1912 in Paris, he turned to the public and said, there are people amongst you who are here to hear, and those who don't want to listen and hear. That's how human will is. So I would like to look at this whole subject from different angles tonight, so explore it together. First exercise here, experiment, I would love for you to look at these. What are these here? What are they?
Candles.
Candles. And if you can tell me some of the distinctions that you see between these candles, what are some of the aspects, attributes that makes these candles different from one another, makes them stand out? What are they?
Shape.
The shape.
Size.
Size.
Some are glass, some have glass, some
Some
have...
have glass containers, like they have castles, but some are naked, they don't have anything.
Color.
Color. Colors, very good. And those of you who would be close, you could say some of them smell good. They have a fragrance. Okay, so that's all it goes as far as when we look at them like that. And no, these are candles. What do we do with candles normally? And can the candles themselves light themselves?
No.
So what has to happen?
You have to light one.
So can they decide that I should not light them?
No.
They cannot choose that, right? If I choose to do it, I'm the one who would be doing it. So I will turn this light on, and then I'll go ahead and I just light this one. How's that? So if we can dim the lights a little bit, can we dim the lights a little bit, Dorothy?
Of course.
Then I would like for you to just give me a brief comparison. So in order to make the time go faster, I have done this exercise and created it many years ago. So I've done it in many places. And so I have a kind of a brief column, two columns. One is for the lit and the other one is unlit. So I'm going to give away all the easy aspects of these, and I'm going to leave the hardest parts to you. How's that?
Okay.
So I'm going to stand on this side. So I've done it with kids, students, everybody in the different people in the community. So some of the things that I have heard, the lit candle is melting, the unlit, all of them are solid. The lit candle is warm, the other one, these are cold. The lit is shrinking, the one stays the same. The lit is illuminating, and the other ones, the unlit is not dull. The lit is alive, the unlit is dead. The lit is giving energy and no energy. So what other things you notice to be the difference between the lit and unlit that you can add to this list?
The lit is more decorative and beautiful than the unlit.
Okay, and what is the unlit?
Just dull,
Dull.
plain.
Okay, very good. What else?
The lit gives warmth.
Lit gives us warmth.
The other one doesn't.
The lit one is realization and the unlit one is potential.
Okay, this is realizing is potential as a candle, and the unlit is just remaining potential. Okay,
The
what
lit
else?
one illumines our surroundings. The unlit one leaves us in the dark.
Very much so. If you did not have all these other lights in here, really the only way we could see what it is that it was because of the lit. Otherwise we would not be able to see, because we need light in order to see anything. Very good. What else? What else do you see to be the difference?
I don't know.
Change in size. The lit one will shrink, the other one stays the same.
Yes, exactly, very true.
One is sacrificing itself
Yes,
to provide this illumination, and the other one is just
Just selfish.
yes, okay, okay. We can say that, very good. What else?
Maybe the lit one has fragrance, the other one doesn't.
That's very true. It because of the heat and the light, all of that, it releases its fragrances, and the other one not as much. Okay. What else? Yeah.
Flame on one is a fire hazard.
That's very true. This one is dangerous because it is contagious and can spread. This one has no power to spread or be contagious. It is basically dead. So that's true.
That's a good one.
Okay. What else?
Good for you. Anything
one has fulfilled the purpose of its creator. The other one is awaiting.
Yes, it's very true. It's very true.
else? That was quick.
So among these candles, by the way, there's one over here that does not have, for some reason,
Away.
does not have a wick. Do you think that I can light this candle?
No,
Because
no way.
Yeah, throw it in the fireplace.
it does not have the necessary instrument in it to be able to catch fire. So all of this brings me to a very wonderful, fascinating hidden words of Baha'u'llah, and as a metaphor for who we are, that he says, the candle, oh befriended stranger. Befriended stranger means God wants us to befriend him, but sometimes we use our will to remain distant And there are those of us in the world that are drawing near to God, and there are those who hesitate, and there are those who refuse to go close. We know that. We use our human will to choose which one we are. So Baha'u'llah calls, "O befriended stranger," because the love that God has for humanity is unconditional. Very much like the sun that shines on everything and everyone alike, whether it is a desert, whether it is a garden, whether it is flowers. You know, I have a garden. When I go in my garden, I notice, I reflect and I notice. If there is all of a sudden something sprouting, I would like to water it, because now I see some signs that is responding to my loving attention. But I don't go to a corner of the garden where nothing is growing and everything is dry and dead. So this interaction between human spirit and love of God is something that is like a baby who says, "Me, give me some too," and the mom will pay more attention. So this is a relationship. This is a turning to, and God says, "O befriended stranger, the candle of thine heart is lighted by the hand of my power." You cannot light it yourself. You don't have the fire on your own. It has to come from me. The candle of thine heart is lighted by the hand of my power. However, he says, quench it not with the contrary winds of self and passion. That means we can't light it, but can we quench it? We can quench it. We have the power to kill it. We don't have the power to light our own candle. This is very fascinating. It's very fascinating that this relationship is the very source of our illumination. But yet, how is it that we have been given the power to kill it? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That's interesting. The most important force in our lives, which is given to us by the hand of God, especially if we ask for it, we can kill it. And how do we do that? Now, I can light all these other candles, and then you see that there is one thing they all have in common. And what could that be?
The wick.
Light.
Wax.
Light.
The flame. In their flame, they're all one, right? In their shapes and wax, they're all different. Very much like what?
People.
Exactly, like us. Unfortunately, we become veiled by the shapes and sizes and the colors and the riches and lack of riches of each other. But in essence, what makes us human beings is what?
Our difference.
Is the flame. Not the wax. Is the flame, which is our humanity.
What's the analogy with the one that has no wick?
Well, in order to be, there is a wonderful hidden word, Baha'u'llah says, "Love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee." The wax by itself is not enough to have the equipment to be able to acquire the flame. So it needs to have the wick also. So just shape of a wax, just someone who walks on 2 feet, it doesn't mean that they are also have all the qualities of being a human being. As a psychotherapist and psychologist, I tell you that there are people who look like all of us but have no conscience. That means the doing of bad or good is the same for them. if they don't worry or they don't get anxious or they don't feel regret, and we call them what? There's a special name for it. We call them sociopaths. These are people who, for some reason, they don't have the ability to feel remorse. Dorothy probably knows that there are some of them appear in the courts. And they do harm to themselves or others, and they don't tell the difference. So there is nothing in them that has the sign of consciousness, divine consciousness, where it gives us the chance to feel distance or near, connect or disconnect, all of those things that are signs of our humanity and makes us to be human and prevents us from harming others, harming ourselves. That bounty, that benefit, that break does not exist. So we have to really appreciate if we feel sense of remorse when we do something that somebody gets upset. We have to appreciate it, that we feel regret if we do something that someone else is not happy about it. Because these are breaks in our consciousness, in our spirit and our soul that protects us from who? From who?
The evil one?
From our own selves. Yeah, because we can be our own worst enemy, can I? You know, we travel with ourselves all the time. Not everybody else in the world travels with us all the time. So we need to learn how to be our own best friend. Well, when we look at the two sides of the lit and unlit candle, you can see the two sides of the human self, basically, that we all have. How many of you like Star Wars? And what is Star Wars about? What?
It's about the light and the dark.
It's about the whole two realities in each one of us. The Darth Vader and the Luke Skywalker in all of us. We all have it. In the Baha'i writings, we hear that we have two sense of self. We have the lower self, the animal self, and the higher self, spiritual self. In the whole field of psychotherapy so far, there is attention only towards the lower self. Actually, in a wonderful magazine that I subscribe to it, a professional magazine called Psychology, Psychotherapy Networker. A few issues ago, they had a whole focus on the human self. And in that issue, they were also talking about mindfulness. Now they are coming to that whole notion of mindfulness, mindful self, and how human soul or human self becomes calmer, becomes more focused, becomes a lot more able when it goes into that zone. And in that issue, I noticed that many of my colleagues are noticing all of a sudden that psychotherapy generally looks at the lower self. So you walk in there and they ask you, what is the problem? Who has hurt you and who did you hurt? And basically that's where it goes. Very little attention or knowledge is about the spiritual self. You just don't have any idea what it is. Where our humanity, our strengths, our powers are in our spiritual self. So I like to share with you a story that has been always fascinating to me, and from one of the most fascinating poets that some of you might have heard his name. And Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith, really loved this poet, Rumi. How many people have heard about Rumi? Or how many people have read his poems or stories? Okay. And Rumi's poems, many of them are also in the form of stories. So this is one story and one long, long poem that in it Rumi mentions the name of Baha'u'llah also. Come. So in this story, he talks about one night in the time of Shah Mahmud. 5 in the middle of the night, 5 thieves with special capacities come together in the middle of the street to consult, they had consultation, in order to know what would be the best way that night to go and rob the castle of the king. Now, remember at that time, people did not know one another. There was no newspaper, no TV, no magazine, nothing. So it was, nobody knew who it was, who was who. So they were talking about their powers, each one of them. So one of them says, well, I have a very, very special power, and that's in my ear. Any animals talk, I understand what they say. And the other thieves say, well, that's very nice, and we need that kind of talent. So you need to come along. The other one says, well, I have a very special power, but my fist is so strong, if I punch into any wall, I can break it. They say, well, we need that, because we're going to go to rob the castle of the king, and it's a very thick wall, so you come along. He says, okay. The other one says, well, I have this power that I can throw a rope way up and high as can go and climb up any kind of a tall wall. They say, well, we definitely need you. That talent is needed, come on. And then this other one says, well, I have this power that doesn't matter how dark, pitch dark the night is, anybody who's around me, I can recognize them day and night, anytime. Just recognize them and see who they are. They say, wow, we really need you. So as they were talking about these talents between themselves, the king is going around the streets in order to see what's going on in his kingdom. And so he comes across these 4 or 5 men talking to each other, and he just stands there and he sees that they are having some kind of conversation, and everybody talking about their talents and their powers. And the king says, well, he wants to know what's going on. He says, I'd like to join you guys, so can you tell me that what is it that I need to do in order to join you? And they say, well, we're going to rob the castle of the king. But each one of us have a special talent. But what do you got that you want to join us? And he thinks and he says, well, actually, I have this power in my mustache. If I move it, any kind of a guilty person goes free. They say, oh, definitely we need that, just in case. So they say, okay, and then they start going towards the castle, and they get to the castle very soon. Everyone shows their thing. As they're walking, a dog is passing by and starts barking. And everybody who turns to the person who says, the animals make a noise, I know what they're saying. And they say, so what is the dog saying? He says, I don't understand. He says, the king is with you. What kind of a dumb idea is that? And they all laugh at it and say, oh, and they keep going. And they rob the castle, and everybody is very happy, and they all get their shares, and they say goodbye to the king. Well, the king knows every single one of them where they're going. So next morning he gets up, he calls his police guy and says the addresses and the names, go get them. So they all brought before the king, and he knows they're guilty, he has witnessed they're guilty, and they're going to all be executed. And the one that has this power that he could recognize anything that he saw in the dark, during the day, he can see it, he knows what it is. He looks, he says, gosh, that is the king? He was with us last night. I recognize him. He was there. And then he says, oh, and I remember the guy with the one who knows the language of the animals. He said it. He said the king is with us, but we just didn't believe him. And then he all of a sudden remembers that, but the king made a claim also, right? What did he say?
Mustache.
Aha. And so he says, you know, I'm going to be dead anyways, but I better speak up my mind, because if I don't, the king, we're going to kill all of us, but if I do, I might make a difference. So he said, my lord, may I say something? And the king says, yeah. He says, there was another person with us last night, and that person has to use his gift in order for this whole story to be complete. And the king realizes that this guy has really recognized him. So out of his mercy, he says, you all had been given special gifts, but you all used it against the will, the good will of the king. You used your gift unlawfully. And so you deserve to be punished, but because of this special situation, this time I'm going to give you the grace of my forgiveness. And you go free. Well, when I read, and I'm sure Rumi means the same. Rumi's stories are all metaphoric and has deep meaning. The question for us is, as we walk through our lives, as we are given free will, and as we are given many gifts, do we realize that the King is with us at all times? And if we don't realize it, really, is that good for us or not good for us? Can we get away with it?
That was a Rumi story?
Yes. So the question is, what is it that we have? This is going to psychology. So this is a very good five-pointed star, which has a cross reference between psychology and spiritual laws and concepts from a Baha'i perspective. So that the upper zone, which is sense perception, is what Abdul Baha calls our physical powers, our wax, the wick. Those are our physical powers. We have eyes, we have ears, we smell. All of those are five senses, are our physical powers. Our senses, believe it or not, from the Baha'i writings, our eyes is not just because this is an instrument that we see with it. Without the help of the soul, there is no ability to see. And as we see, we select what to see, and we select what to hear. There's a hidden word Baha'u'llah says, see no evil, hear no evil. Which means what? Seeing evil and hearing evil is a choice, is a will. It's not that we see everything. You close your eyes and I ask you, what do you see in this room? You're not going to remember everything. We are selective in what we see. So we are responsible for what we see and what we don't see, what we hear and what we don't hear. No, that's one part of it. We hear it. So we are sitting in this whole room here, and somebody across the room has a special smile on their face, whatever. What would be the normal feeling in a generality of people? What would be your feeling? Somebody's smiling.
Happy.
Happy.
Yeah.
So we will feel happy. What do we want to do? Our intention.
Smile back.
Smile back. What would be our action?
Smiling.
Exactly. Now, is it possible that the same smile in that person in the room would create a feeling of EBGBs or being uncomfortable in another person?
Yeah.
Very possible. The question is, what creates that feeling of being uncomfortable, considering that the smile, the stimulation, the source is the same. It doesn't change.
There's
In
something
one
wrong
person,
with the person.
happiness, in the, I'm sorry?
There's something wrong with the other person.
What do you mean by that?
And maybe they're mentally unstable. That's why they translate the feeling of smiling as something negative, and it causes anxiety in them.
Well, as a psychotherapist, I will never assign a diagnosis to someone who sees things differently. It's just that they're seeing it differently. They might feel uncomfortable because they attribute something to that smile that other person do. And we all actually have that capacity. Look at our politics. Look at how we are all looking at the same country, at the same people. And absolutely, one side sees black and the other side sees white. The one side says purple and the other one says polka dot. So the whole notion of us looking at the same thing and having different feelings about it is very human.
Interpretation.
And guess what? And when marriages happens and people don't realize this whole free will in all of us, you think those marriages. So the question makes it more complicated is that according to the Baha'i writings, we have two sides to our reality. One, we have a dark matter, lower self, human self, animal self, and then a spiritual self. The spiritual self, the way it thinks, is going to be and needs to be identical to the way God thinks. It's a God-like self. Now, this makes it not easy, I can tell you that, because one of the neuroscientists recently, Andrew Neuberg, wrote a book called How God Changes Our Brain. Well, this is a neuroscientist. What he means is, whoever it is that we believe in him or in it, whatever it is that we are taught to believe, and that means that's the way we are taught to think. Basically, it changes the wiring of our brain. And it makes us more inclined to go a certain way, more inclined not to go. What do you think racism? What do you think the whole notion of not finding women and men equal? What do you think this comes that this guy at the gate thinks, who are women? They don't know, they're dumb. Where did that come from? Why is it that the wiring of his brain is working in a way that he is going there when he looks at the woman? Or with all the Harvey Weinstein, whatever stories are going out there, all of those are the rewiring of the brain that has happened as a result of exposure to certain kind of thoughts, patterns of thoughts, upbringing, behavior, what is right, what is wrong, all of those things that are taught to us. We know racism is taught. Nobody's born racist. It just doesn't exist. It is a learned disease, spiritual disease. So the notion of taking responsibility for our thoughts is one of at the center of our human will and having will. Now, one of the wonderful scholars of the faith who was executed in Iran, Dr. Dawoodi, was a wonderful mentor and teacher for me when I was young in Iran, studied with him. According to the enemies who captured him and executed him, he was a professor of French philosophy and a scholar in the writings of the faith. No parallel for him that I know. Fortunately, he has left wonderful books, especially in relation to free will, the station of the manifestations of God, the soul, all of that, which is fantastic to go and read. So I like to give him credit because my mind has been illuminated by many of the things which is difficult subject to study from him. So one of the things that he says, how do we know, how do we feel? Because both God and soul is something we feel we have. Some of us, when we feel I have a soul, then there's no other reason for it. Just the fact that you feel that you have a soul, that's good enough. And the same thing is relationship with God. So, Dr. Dawudi says, one of the signs you can tell that you have the soul and the free will is when you do something, when you take an action. Before you take the action, you say, should I or should I not? Which means what?
Choice.
You have choice. You recognize choice. Should I eat this ice cream or should I
No.
not? Should I yell at my child or should I not? Should I criticize my husband or should I not?
Yes, you definitely should.
Then, he says, the other sign of the soul is when you do something and it backfires, you have regret. And regret is another sign that tells you you had choice, right? And that's why in the courts, if somebody comes and they have no remorse, Dorothy gets very upset. Because not having remorse means this person has not developed their capacity, their consciousness as a human being. We are supposed to be able to have empathy towards one another, sympathy towards one another, want each other's well-being, and also see that we are all connected. These are part of the conditions of being human being and expressing our humanity. Now, one thing which is very fascinating is that there is two elements that has been in motion ever since the beginning of history. One is values, and the other one is virtues. Now, can anybody tell me a virtue? What would be one virtue?
Truthfulness.
Very good. Truthfulness is a virtue. What else?
Love,
Love is a virtue. What else?
Honesty.
Honesty is a virtue.
compassion.
Compassion. Now, what are the values that we will frame these virtues with throughout the history? For example, at the time of Moses, right, the value that framed love, that means who would you love, who would you not love, right? Who are the people that will deserve your love? All of them were within the tribe. Within the tribe, you love everybody, you're honest, you're friendly. Outside of the tribe, what do you do to them?
Kill them.
Kill them, exactly. Well, it's not very different today either. It's just like our politics is the same way. In the tribe, you support. Outside of the tribe, you hack. So, that was the norm. During the time of Christ, that circle that really defined the limits of our attributes was city of Athens, or city of this and city of that. During the time of Muhammad, that expanded to nation of Islam. It could be Indonesia and Malaysia and all of those things, but as long as you were people in the book, you really deserved to the attributes, good attributes of humanity in that circle. When Baha'u'llah came, the announcement was what? What was the circle? That all humanity is deserving, this is the new law, of your attributes, your love, your honesty, your integrity, your humanity. And therefore, 1948, what did we make? All the nations come together, we created the
United Nations.
that also
United Nations.
the declaration of the human
Right.
rights. That means we declare there are certain basic human rights, including in them is equality of men and women, right? Was it? But of course, from declaring it to acting on it takes a. But notice that with the coming of a new messenger of God, the spiritual laws, what happens to it? Changes. There is no longer the law of an eye for an eye.
Right.
Because then everybody will be blind, right? There is no longer that. Now Baha'u'llah says, mankind is one. We cannot go around and practice racism because it will destroy the very fabric of our communities. It is no longer just destroying somebody else. It destroys all of us. It's like stabbing your own self because we are connected. Baha'u'llah says, he sheds a new light. He says, you remember you're sitting there, separate candles and separate shapes and separate form, but you remember you are all sharing the same flame. And the wind that you blow is going to make all of them go out.
Yvonne, 5 minutes.
Oh, sure. Thank you
Then
for that.
we'll come back.
Yes. So the laws that applies to us, what is humanity today, is going to be different than what it was 2,000 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago. So the question is, are we going to be forced by some force to accept these laws of Baha'u'llah? Or are we given the free will to choose it for ourselves?
Free will.
And Baha'u'llah says what? He says, love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. Know this, O servant. That means the human will is the blessing and also the curse. Because of it, we could refuse the light or we can welcome the light. That is up to us. No force can force us to do it. Because God wants to be loved. Love cannot be forced. And that is another sign of the free will. Deciding and wanting and behaving in a way that we can fall in love with Him, with the Beloved. And after the break, I will continue, and then you guys can tell me some of your questions, and then we will do some other explanation. I learned through the courses that we designed for the high school students that we did at the Pomona High School. I learned that one of the things consistently, they would say they liked in our process of teaching empowerment was stories. They really, really liked stories, and they remembered them, and they repeated them. But one day we thought that one of the best ways to really get them empowered and have them practice, because you learn from Dorothy, one of the principles in the Baha'i writing is knowledge, volition, action. That means the world provides us today a lot of information. There's no longer a shortage of knowledge. That is not what we go to school for. Because you don't need to go to school, pay money to be bombarded by information. The thing that is very difficult to get even in colleges is to choose what knowledge is the good knowledge and what knowledge is really not of any consequence, is a waste of time. Because you got to be selective. And then once you select a knowledge, you have to ask whether this is for good or is it not for good. Can I use it for good? So one of the questions I ask my students always, I said, what is good? Or I ask my patients, my clients, I said, what do you think is good? What defines good? How do you decide something is good? So when you decide and determine and use your will to do it, then it is not wasted, because life is not very long. It's very short. We cannot be doing a whole bunch of stuff that is not of a positive consequence or doesn't make any difference whether we do it or not. I'm just going to put that question to you. What do you think defines what is good? How do we decide something is good or something is not good? what is our parameter?
What morality says about it?
Okay, tell me something about that.
In other words, whether it's accepted by society or not?
Okay, so let me shed this. How many of you watched Mudbound, this new movie that came out just recently? And it is very, very moving. And it's also
Mudbound.
Mudbound. And the director is a young woman apparently, and she is very promising. It is a very, very unusual angle of looking at the whole issue of racism in this country. And it is the story of a small, very small town almost, that there were people in it, the whites were all the, all land owners and whatever, and the blacks were the working for them. But two of these young people in this village during the war were selected to go to war. One was a black, very strong, bright, brilliant, sharp black guy, and the other one was a white guy. They go to war when, of course, at the end of the war, they both are traumatized with what we call it today, what? Post-traumatic stress disorder, all the traumas of the war that creates in us, the flashbacks and bad dreams, and we can't just be normal, we have to numb ourselves, and people go into drugs and whatever it is to numb the pain that they feel. So coming back from the war, these two became friends because nobody in the whole village was really could relate to them. And this started a whole stir of racist, strong racist actions and thinking. And the grandfather of this child was very racist. And so the whole village, actually the whole society was very much in that way. Only two were not, but these two. So in that sense, the majority were for lynching him. So is that going to be good just because everybody wants to do it?
Why were they gonna lynch? Because the two were friends, is that what?
Yeah.
Because the white guy and the black guy
They're
became
associated
friends.
with each other.
It was breaking the norms,
Okay.
basically.
I think it's been proven throughout history that if we look to society for what's good, we're in a lot of trouble. God, good means God, okay? So if your will agrees with what God has asked you to do, after you have investigated, then you can assume it's good. And if you have a real moral compass within, when you think and do something bad, you'll feel it right here. And that's a blessing. Because we're only human and sometimes we'll go to our lower nature. But today, a lot of society looks to society, and society is their God.
For your knowledge, much of what you said is correct. However, as human beings, we do not have independently an inner compass to tell us whether we are on the right track or the wrong track.
I do.
The reason is because we all are very much like that proverbial frog. And we have no idea how acclimated we are to the environment that we are living. So the proverbial frog, you put him in a hot pan, and what does the frog do? Jumps out. But you put him in the cool pan and very gradually heat underneath of it, and what does the frog do?
Stay.
Will stay until it dies and will never tell the difference between too hot versus just warm. So human society and civilization has been through all the ups and downs, the reason for it, and we have done as human beings some very good things, but also some very heinous stuff. The reason for it is not because we, all the evil people did all the evil things, is because we don't have an inner compass on our own. this inner compass is constantly pliable and guided and is affected and influenced by a lot of things around us. We call it peer pressure, we call it social norms, we call it a lot of things, and we call it also religion. So we have to remember one of the sources of great atrocities in the history of humanity has been in the name of religion. And so we go and read this book of this neuroscientist, How God Can Change Our Brain. It basically, what he's saying is, whatever it is that you are taught in the context of especially religion, because it has so much force in it, has so much feeling in it, has so much dedication in it, has so much the context that you surrender your will to it, it has greater power to steer a whole population in a direction where they would be killing others in the name of religion, destroying others in the name of religion. So coming back to the whole question of what is good, it is very difficult because we all are brought up with certain things to be good, and we don't know how to change it depending on our culture. For example, I'm trying to remember from my culture when I was growing up. I had a Muslim friend. We were the closest of the closest friend together. When we would go to school together, every day we walked to school together. And she was very open-minded. Her family was very highly educated. She was Muslim background. So one day I was invited to go to her house after many years for the first time. So when I walked out, her mom and dad, they washed every single dish that I had touched. What did it come from? Of the belief that me as a Baha'i, in their belief, defiles when I touch something, and that thing becomes defiled, and they need to rinse it and clean it. Well, this is a belief, and this belief turns into action, and this belief is taught. So I cannot hold them as guilty, but this is how their brain is trained and work. All of us, at all time, are susceptible to becoming inclined to certain directions that might not be, the right way. And what is the right way? So they asked Abdul Baha this question: what is the meaning of good? And I think the answer is enormously brilliant. Abdul Baha says, when you do something, anybody, when they do something that only benefits them, this is the farthest from good. When you do something that it benefits your family and you, that's got some good in it. And if you do something that not only benefits you and your family, but also maybe the city or the village, it becomes a little bit more good. Baha'u'llah says, today, the foremost condition of something to be good, absolutely good, if that thing benefits all mankind, everyone. So for example, if you go and teach in a school, just a bunch of children, does that benefit all humanity? Potentially does. Because those children could learn from what you did, and the ripple effect illuminates the whole world. So you can consider that good. Especially if you're not including in there any whisperings of the lower self. You mean, I'm going to get acknowledgement, I'm going to get a prize, I'm going to get, praise, I'm going to get some money. None of those. Doing it really without any acknowledgement of the lower self, only for the sake of God. That can be closest to good that we can do. So this whole notion that we are part of a organic whole, that we are one cell in it guides our steps in many directions, including when we believe in that we are all a cell in this organic body of the whole. If I harm myself, am I harming somebody else? In that way, yes it is. Because I no longer am an isolated me, but I am part of a greater whole. So my wellness, my happiness, my health, everything about me is affecting and will affect everybody else. So this principle, which is like the law of gravity, it is not subject to whether people agree with it or not. Right? What happens if we don't believe in the law of gravity? Can we use our will and say, I don't believe in the law of gravity? Can we do that?
You can say it, but it's.
Yeah, I mean, you can say it. Of course you can say, so I don't believe in it. That's it. But is it going to be making an exception for you when you go to the top of the roof and bend your head way too much to look down? Is the law of gravity going to say, well, this Kayvon didn't believe in it, so let's be exceptional here. She's not going to fall down. Is it going to be that?
No.
The consequences of breaking a spiritual law is going to be the same as consequences of breaking any law.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Okay. You said, we're all taught prejudices, we're all taught colorism, we're all taught this person is better than that person. But don't you believe that we can change our wiring?
Of course.
Oh,
Absolutely.
you didn't give me that impression.
Oh, absolutely we can. That's why if there was not the possibility of our wiring changing, why would Christ come? Why would Moses come? Why would Muhammad come? Why would Baha'u'llah come? And then not only come, but suffer imprisonment, crucifixion, all of that. Why? It would be meaningless. So the reason that God sends these luminaries to come and light our candles and says, who is willing to come? And we all, some of us rush and some of us don't, and some of us welcome it, some of us resist, because that's human will, is that we are very able, and now with science we know until much later years to be pliable and to be educated. And the greatest element that makes that change possible is our will.
Right, but as
We
you
choose.
as you grow and as you choose, you don't believe that you know when you're doing something right or wrong?
Depends.
Maybe everybody doesn't, but I'll tell you, it's a gift when you have it.
Well, definitely it's a gift, but if we all had that ability and that gift, and we all had the same, we all had really, we all knew what the divine will is for today. If we all knew that, and we all believed in it, and we all acted on it, and we all felt bad if we did not really live it, nobody would be subjecting women to the treatment.
That's right.
Nobody will be subjecting the other people because of their religion
Right.
to the cruelties that we are.
Right.
Nobody will be subjecting other people to the depravity of economic conditions that we are okay with
Our
it.
hearts would be changed.
Exactly.
And that's the goal.
Exactly. So that means what? That means that we as human beings have the capacity to embrace the light. However, because it is the issue of the human will, and because it is the issue of we choosing to do it, we have to present it in a way that others want to embrace it. It's not going to be anything that you go force. The age of force is no longer here.
Yes.
So your reasoning and then also our example has to be convincing. So the most powerful force is the way we live the life.
Yeah.
And that would be most contagious. That would be the most convincing part. So it is this part, the action. It is thinking God-like. So the more we think like Him, the more we think like the prayers, the more we think like the hidden words, the more the chances are that we can translate these thoughts into God-like actions. And the more the world becomes a place where every human being has the time, has the opportunity to show their humanity every moment, every second. I want to close with one story because we talked about that and we talked about racism. So some years ago, for 8 years, I did a TV program about the subject of the 8 years was transforming human consciousness. So how do we do that? And Dorothy came to talk, and Jim Nelson was there. Many people were my guests, and it was illuminating. So there were 2 half-an-hour shows every month.
You only get one.
So one time, I invited this wonderful young friend of mine, Justin Yu. At the time, he was a high school 4.0 African-American student. I don't know how many of you know Justin Yu.
No.
Justin was a 4.0 student. His mom, Joni Yu, one of my dearest friends, like a sister.
Yeah, we know him.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. We didn't
Joni
understand.
passed away not too long ago. And Justin was a football player, an athlete, a 4.0 student. For all practical purposes, he was a shining, brilliant light of all things. It was just... So one day, he was in a not Monrovia High School where he goes and everybody knew him, but in the neighboring city's basketball court. So sitting on the bleachers, 2 of his friends, Caucasian friends, up above the bleachers, started to fight, and they got into a fist fight. And Justin turned around and looked, and he saw what's going on, and he decided he goes to separate them because he didn't want that to happen. So he goes there and he separates, and all of a sudden, the police comes in, and they look, they see 2 white guys, 1 black guy, they go arrest him.
Of
course.
And they take him and they put him in the police car, force him there, mace in his face and everything like that. Who you are, we know all of you. That it doesn't matter. His uncle, who was an athlete there, he goes, all the black guys who go and tell him, this police car, boy, he did not do that. No way. Until the white coach comes and tells the police, you know, this is not, you're not having the right guy, you're gonna let him go. Finally, so he lets him go. But they still turn around and tell him, oh, we know you, which means attacking someone's humanity. So, you know, when he was interviewing with me, he said something I never ever forgot. And every once in a while, I think of it, and it just makes me so upset. He said, and his sister Ruhia was there too. He said, you know, Kevon, you know what makes me the saddest about this whole incident is that this living in this society deprives me of the opportunities of showing my humanity.
Yeah.
And that the right to be able to make a difference the way you believe it is your human right, that is the hardest, most precious thing somebody can take away from you. So when we say, what I would like to summarize today's talk about the free will is that as human beings, none of us has an inner compass on our own that we would say that I, by myself, can recognize the teachings that Baha'u'llah has given to the world, and I could know what is good for today, and I can decide to do that. That is impossible. Not only is it impossible because we are influenced by all the influences around us, The other, which is very special and very absolutely necessary, is when there is a universal consciousness which is released into the human civilization. It gives an opportunity for all the minds to be attracted to it, and basically to be looking up to the point of illumination. So the point of illumination for all humanity becomes one. And that provides the opportunity for all of us to show our humanity in the same way. All of us to respect the equality of men and women. All of us to recognize the oneness of humanity. All of us to look at there is only one God. All of us to say that it's better to give ourselves to others than to force our will upon others. All of us believe in the independent investigation of truth. All of these teachings create a civilization where it will collectively strive in one direction. It doesn't mean that we will not have differences of opinion, believe me, we will. But it will give us a whole lot of help and assistance to be really freeing ourselves from this part of us which divides us, the animal self that basically is limited, is captive of nature, that it wants to eat, it wants to hunt, it wants to be safe, it wants to be comfortable. However, as human beings, we do want those things too. But when we are hungry, we don't just go grab whatever food we can get wherever. We go find a place, maybe work for it, and then ask permission. We go through certain steps in order to satisfy our animal needs. And then as far as the expression of our humanity, our spiritual reality, then we understand at this age, it needs to be benefiting what?
The whole world.
The whole world. It cannot be a tribal. It cannot be only my family. It cannot be only my city. It cannot be only my country. It cannot be only the people who look like me. It has to be everyone. So the definition of good, now Baha'u'llah has taught humanity, needs to embrace everyone. So our free will be only serving us good as long as it is within the frame of the laws, the spiritual laws that are given us. Outside of that, it would be destructive at this age. It would not be conducive to making us happy or safe or grow or be free with our conscience, be at peace with our conscience. So decisions that brings us happiness, should I or should I not? And those that we act on it and will not bring regret, all would fall within the frame of the teachings of Baha'u'llah for today. So knowing it, learning it, being open to it, exchanging ideas and prayers and immersing in it is going to be part of this fixing the compass, the inner compass. So we would be happy to do His will, not happy to waver from His will.